Our veterans need your support. Foxfield Farm for a Recovery Mission is a not-for-profit organization that has been established to provide an equestrian groundwork training program for U.S. veterans with PTSD and related issues incurred through military service. This curriculum will be offered at absolutely no cost to any veteran participating in the program. This foundation will also incorporate the repurposing of rescue horses and locating new, responsible owners. The synergy of the work invested by the veterans to aid the recovery of these horses is equitably therapeutic. Please go to our website to be a supporter, www.foxfieldrecoverymission.org. Thank you.
Your host,
Hello, and thank you for joining me today. My guest is George Jepsen, Connecticut's esteemed Attorney General since 2011. It's a pleasure to be here with you again, George.
Good to be back on your show.
Good, great. Well, we're going to jump right into it. I think in the forefront today, today's news is the budget, Connecticut's budget. And I'm going to read something
Or lack thereof.
Or lack thereof, exactly. Well put. I'm going to read something. It's something that you wrote. It's from Connecticut's News Junkie, October 3rd. And it reads, Attorney General George Jepsen opined Tuesday it's not exactly clear how the court would view the spending decisions Democratic Governor Dannel P. Malloy has made in the absence of a state budget because the decision the judiciary would have to apply is 125 years old. And I quote, the precise constitutional limits of the governor's authority are difficult both to delineate and to apply, Jepsen wrote.
And we meant it.
And we meant it, okay.
Yeah, this is uncharted territory. It's very complicated, and the Staub decision, to which you referred, is 125 years old. It was an 1892 decision at a time when state government was obviously far more limited in its scope than it is today. And the governor, you have to feel for him because the legislature has not given him what he asked for back in July, when we're now 3 months into, more than 3 months into not having a budget. That's more than a quarter of the year. And still, he has to make state government function in one way or the other. And so it's not clear, because this is uncharted territory, just what the scope of his authority, the scope of his discretion to pick and choose which services to fund. That Staub decision from 125 years ago sets forth two loose principles, but how even they can be interpreted would be anybody's guess in front of in a courtroom.
Who interprets? Do you interpret, or who interprets?
Well, ultimately a court would be interpreting it.
Okay.
We're trying to interpret it and make sense of it, and but again, you're applying statements that were made 125 years ago to circumstances that exist today. And the two principles that it seemed to assert, because the drafting wasn't perfect, is that there's certain core functions of government identified in the state constitution, things like public safety, public education, that are intrinsic to government functioning. The framers of the Constitution obviously wouldn't want society in Connecticut to fall apart. Yeah.
Right.
And so you got to figure out what are those core functions, but the decision provides no real guidance as to where that line gets drawn. So there's a continuum out there where, say, state police, for example, and keeping prisons maintained, and at the other end might be some state parks. But where you draw the line in between is reasonable people can differ. The second principle that it establishes is that where there's an existing statute that creates and defines a program, so that statute's in place even though we don't have a budget, then the governor is authorized to make expenditures pursuant to that existing state law. That leaves the whole area of where most of the big parts of the budget is, huge parts of the budget are, where the implementation language that defines how a program should be administered usually comes with the budget, and so it's called the implementation bills.
I see.
And absent those implementation bills, there's no statutory authority to make those expenditures, and so that's the area that's
the sticky wicket.
The sticky wicket, and again, it's reasonable people can differ as to what the constitutional underpinning is, and what state statutes, what they define for expenditures. And I just wish that the legislature would
sure.
do what Governor Malloy had asked them to do originally, which is, if you can't give me a full budget,
right.
give me an ongoing resolution
right.
by which to run
So
the
would you just continue on as we did last year until the budget is reached?
Right.
You just go on doing what you've been doing?
Yeah, traditionally when you go over the June 30th fiscal year deadline,
right.
there's an ongoing resolution
yes.
that says continue to do what
right.
you were doing.
Right, so if
we
you
get
kept
a full
the prisons
budget.
covered
Right.
and the schools covered, and
Yeah.
you're supposed to keep everything covered.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's kind of like a hand of poker where you're going light until you see what happens
Right.
Towards the end. All right, because the big thing is the municipalities have already done their budgets, and they had to get them all done, and they're hanging out. They're literally hanging out. Some of them have money to carry them to the spring. Some have very little money. Some don't have rainy day funds. So they're all waiting and anticipating, what will we do if we don't
All
get the
true,
money,
and yet one more reason for
Sure.
the legislature to either give a full budget or at least present an ongoing resolution that would allow regular government functions to continue. So it's
not quite
disappointing.
defined. And maybe what we're doing is setting a new template. Maybe somewhere along the line,
Yeah.
someone's going to say we better define this in case this ever happens again. All right, well, moving on, we've got another subject that you have been addressing. This is plaintiffs in the federal generic drug antitrust lawsuit. Give us some sense of what that's all about.
Yeah, this is a fascinating issue that affects just about everybody in the nation, because at one time or another, everybody takes a generic drug. About 90% of the drugs that are consumed in America are generics. Only about 10%, 11% are branded drugs. And about a little over 3 years ago, in July of 2014, lawyers in my office read an article in the New York Times, if you can
You're
believe it.
wonderful lawyers.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
great
lawyers, yeah. Read an article in the New York Times about a spike in the price of a particular generic
Yes.
drug. They asked permission to investigate it
Okay.
and uncovered evidence not related to that generic drug, but to others, that pointed to what we believe is systematic price fixing in the generic drug market. And within 3 months, my guys were passing on to the Justice Department evidence that they had accumulated. Justice started its own criminal investigation. Connecticut continued to pursue alone from the civil side, the only state pursuing this. And then about a year ago, and I'm very proud to say that state attorneys general work well on a bipartisan basis on these national issues. We informed Justice that we wanted to bring other states in, and within just a few weeks of that September a year ago, we had 47 states with us investigating this. This
is the one thing I want to point out in our interview here today. You have great ability for coalition.
Yeah.
A great ability to well, let's say, work across the aisle, work across state lines. This has been one of the attributes, major attributes.
Yeah, and it's there have been multi-states before, but the tobacco settlement 20 years ago set in motion a culture that encourages folks working together on a bipartisan basis. And in my 6.5 years, Connecticut has been very active on these multi-states, whether it was mortgage foreclosure issues, suing Wall Street, price fixing in the e-books, and now we're data privacy, opioids, and prescription drugs. So last December, we filed our first lawsuit involving 2 drugs and 6 generic manufacturers, including 2 of the largest companies in the world. And I think it's widely anticipated, has been anticipated in the press, that and then sometime fairly soon you'll see significant expansion of that lawsuit into exponentially more drugs and a multiple of the manufacturers.
So net at the end of the day, this is going to help people on Medicare and people on fixed, and this is going to be a major benefit.
What we hope is 2 things. Industry reform, so that there is genuine competition in the generic drug field, which would mean lower prices.
Down, yep.
And then secondly, reimburse the states for their expenses in the Medicaid program, where essentially states have been overpaying for drugs that should have been.
So the reimbursement then will come back from the companies themselves. Is that?
Presumably,
okay.
We would be seeking damages from the companies, plus industry reform.
All right. Well, another major subject you've been attacking is. I'm going to read this quote from you, Equifax data breach. This is a massive and very concerning data breach, and we are working to assess its impact on Connecticut residents. Big deal. This is a big thing.
Yeah, this is like breaking into Fort Knox.
Right,
This is Equifax. Connecticut has been a leader on investigating multi-states together. We typically team up with Illinois. This time we've got, I think, 44 states, and it's Illinois, Connecticut, and Pennsylvania in the lead. So we've investigated major breaches before, whether it's Anthem or Home Depot, Neiman Marcus, Target. But this is the largest in terms of the number of individuals affected. But more significantly, there's personal data, and there's personal data. It's one thing to have a credit card compromise. You can always cancel the card and get a new one, and you're back to where you were. But with Equifax, it was in most cases names, addresses, dates of birth, social security numbers. So the information, someone needs to create a new identity, and I got to be careful what I say because it's an ongoing investigation.
Sure.
But it has been reported widely in the press that Equifax was warned about the defect in their software, and had a couple, and then there was a patch available for it, but they never availed themselves of that patch. And so if that businesses and not-for-profits who are breached can be victimized.
Wasn't there selling of stock?
There was selling of stock, and that's being investigated.
Is that a go-to-jail thing?
It depends on how.
I think one of the guys has already stepped down, is he not? One of the senior executives?
Yeah.
Has already stepped down?
The president and CEO did step down. It really depends on the circumstances. But, businesses are victimized. You can take all the steps that do everything right and still get breached. And so when we approach an investigation into a data breach, we try and understand what went wrong and the extent to which they were doing the things they should have been doing to prevent it. We also try to investigate whether they're taking steps to fix it so it won't happen again, and then what's being done to protect consumers.
And in fact, I think you mentioned the patch. People really should go back to Equifax to look for the protection. Maybe they can, and I won't mention any names, but there are other companies who help protect your information, and maybe you can turn to them, but not necessarily going back to the same horse that bit you.
Well, that's an individual consumer's choice.
Yeah, that's their choice. All right, now there's another one here. It says Connecticut joins multi-state lawsuit challenging President Trump on DACA. Now, kind of has been pushed aside for the moment because of all the other emergencies we've had in Puerto Rico and Houston and so forth, and the latest thing in Las Vegas. But where are we on the DACA thing?
These immigration issues are tricky from my office's standpoint because I don't have criminal jurisdiction. Other state attorneys general office do have criminal jurisdiction, and so we've joined a lawsuit that challenges Trump's action on DACA. It's just terrible public policy for one thing, the terrible public policy.
What's the crux of the, what is Connecticut concerned about what the president said? What's the specific point that's sticking?
The damages that we are asserting is that these young people are contributing members of our society. They're productive members of the economy,
paying taxes.
Paying taxes. They are in school,
or employed,
which means that the public schools have a public subsidy, and so if we help educate them and then they're thrown out of the country, it's a loss for Connecticut. But I don't have the they're here illegally legal hook.
I see.
And so I'm more limited in what the issues that I can address. But the core of it is Democratic attorneys general. We haven't been able to get any Republicans, even though a number of national Republicans, from a policy standpoint, agree that DACA needs to be fixed so these young people have a path to citizenship and the capacity to stay and be productive members of our society. We have filed suit challenging Trump's action, and now it won't become concrete until Trump gave 6 months for Congress to address this issue, and I hope Congress moots this issue completely by addressing it in an appropriate manner. But if 6 months comes and goes, and we'll be ready with the lawsuit.
Okay. Now, I don't want to get too far down the weeds, but I guess the difference is, just to be clear for our viewers, is that an anchor baby is where a pregnant woman comes to the United States. She has the baby here. Now, that is a legal person. If they grew up and went to school and got a job and paid their taxes, that's legal. The problem here is they've taken a child who already exists in the world and brought them
Correct.
here.
And these are the DACA. To qualify for DACA, you can't have a criminal record.
Okay.
And you have to have been brought to this country when you're 16 years of age or under.
Oh, okay.
And so
good clarification.
These are people who really had no control over their lives. They were brought here when they were 2, 3, 4, 5, anything up to 16.
Right.
And effectively, for most of them, the United States is the only country they've ever really known.
Yeah.
If you came here when you were 7 years old, you're not going to have any meaningful connection with, because one of the other requirements is that you have to have been here continuously for a period of time. So it's not like you were shuttling back and forth between here and family in Ecuador or something like that.
So in other words, they never really applied for true citizenship then, did they, or did they not?
No, this program says it's not a citizenship granting program.
Okay.
It's you pass the qualifications by the age that you came here, and you've been on good behavior as a resident of America.
Do they end up with Social Security numbers and things?
This allows them to. So we're going to allow you to work and kind of operate not in the shadows.
Green card kind of thing.
It's a little bit like that, but it essentially says we're not going to expel you from the country. You don't have to live in the shadows.
Yeah.
You can.
You've been a good guy. So
you can go to school.
Okay.
You can work and pay taxes and.
Can they join the military?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And some do. We do.
All right. Well, good for the clarification. That's very appreciative of that. All right. Now you've joined 18 other AGs in urging protection for transgender service members. So we know that there have been many people have been serving in the military, doing a good job.
Thousands have served, transgender individuals. Thousands have served with distinction. This is a nothing burger of an issue. I mean, there is no reason whatsoever that they should be denied the opportunity to serve their country. It's just once again an example of President Trump nakedly appealing to his shrinking base of support. And
why do you suppose this subject came up if they're literally doing their job and everything? Why did it come up?
Trump didn't even confer with the defense secretary.
Okay.
It was not an issue within the armed forces. It's not like generals were petitioning the Secretary of Defense.
If anything, they're kind of defending the position.
Exactly. And Mattis was caught completely by surprise by Trump.
Right.
He got up one morning and decided he was going to take this step. You know, it's disruptive and it's mean.
I think the only thing that I guess we could point out is that there are things where they say that once you're in the military and then the military has to pay if you want to become a transgender. Maybe that's where it stemmed from, and now we have to pay for it and so forth. But if you've already been there and done that and so forth, that dropped the subject.
I mean, the cost is the least of these issues. Yeah. Trump didn't do it for cost reasons. He did it to make an appeal to his base.
To his base. All right. All right, now we also have, talking about victims, we were talking about protections for campus sexual assault victims. And you've joined with 19 other attorneys general in a letter to Education Secretary Betsy DeVos to express concerns over reports that the Federal Department of Education intends to roll back policies designed to protect victims of sexual assault on college and university campuses.
Sexual assault on college campuses is a very real issue in this country, and the simple, hard truth is that most victims of sexual assault don't get the help and care that they need, and their victimizers are not brought.
They become second victims in a way.
Yeah. And under the Obama administration, the Secretary of Education promulgated rules that tightened up procedures on campuses for reporting and dealing responsibly with sexual assault. Betsy DeVos wants to roll those back. I respectfully disagree with her.
Well, when in terms of sexual assault, because there seem to be a lot of things when two people are going out together or on a date or whatever they are, and there's a lot of she said yes and then she said no, and so I guess we get to the point where it becomes cloudy and murky, is where perhaps she did say yes to a point, and perhaps she had too much to drink, or whatever the case may be, or she thought it was a good idea, and then suddenly it wasn't a good idea. And then maybe, you know, the fellow pushes it too far and whatever, and then she thinks about it, and then she reports him. And maybe it didn't get, but I think that's where it becomes so murky. He said, she said. Was it really a sexual assault, or was just she made it up, or whatever?
It is murky. It's, and usually it's the male, obviously. Simply on the testimony of one person shouldn't be found guilty, as it were. But there needs to be additional evidence that would support and corroborate one side over the other. But the way it has been stacked historically, I'm very confident in saying that to the extent that there have been victims, it's not always, but generally the female.
Because what you hear about is protection for the football players, you know.
Yeah.
And you hear about, you know, well, he's the quarterback, he's the star quarterback, and we can't lose him off the team. So, you know, they gather their forces and circle the wagons to protect him, and the coach protects him, and so forth. So I do think that it's a subject that needs to be addressed, obviously. I think also, personally, I'm just going to throw my comment in, I do think that women do need to be responsible for their circumstances too. And if they feel the circumstances are not right and they feel the party's getting a little wild, perhaps they also need to take the responsibility of getting out of there.
Well, everybody needs to be more self-aware, and males need to be aware that what might have passed as acceptable behavior 20 or 30 or 40 years ago is not acceptable.
Yeah. All right, our next subject, I think, really perhaps, I want to say it could be anyone, but there are a lot of elderly people who have retired and they're staying at home, and they get phone calls from the IRS saying that they owe money, that there will be a court case against them, that they'll be hauled in, there will be fines and so forth. They get these robocalls. Your comments on these things, and what can people do to protect themselves? Hang up.
Hang up is right. Just be aware that the IRS is not going to be calling you. There's some subcontracting of work of debt collection, but basically, if you're getting a call, a telephone call about a debt, and involves the IRS, it is almost certainly a scam, and watch for pressure tactics. Do not give any personal information like your Social Security number or bank account numbers, ask for it in writing, and absolutely never, just as a rule, a hard, fast rule, don't respond to an over-the-telephone demand for payment.
Well, I think the other thing is too, you know, if they, I don't even know if they sometimes give a phone number to call back, or you have caller ID and you call them back and the number doesn't register, you don't get anybody at the other end. That's another obvious,
telltale sign.
that's another telltale sign when there's nothing there to respond to. And I think the other part of that is that the fear that's put into people is an aggravation. And I guess the question I would ask is, isn't anybody doing anything about these scammers? I mean, is there no investigation?
No, there is investigation, but
Okay.
but it's almost a guarantee that whatever phone call you're getting, it's not from next door.
Yeah, right, right.
It's from another country,
Sure.
or someplace far away, and so prevention is really what it's all about, and it means awareness. And it's not just getting a call from the IRS
Yes,
demanding payment. It could. I know a friend who they get a call allegedly from a utility company demanding payment.
Oh, yeah.
Or it could be a flip side. It could be a positive thing. It says, if you just won this
Oh,
important
yes,
prize.
yes.
You know, I've
Are you
done
George
calls like
Jepson?
that.
You
Yeah.
say yes, and they record
Right.
your yes.
And so they promise you
Yes.
something, but
Right.
of course they need you to send $100 in order to get
Right, right.
$500,
Right.
or of course they need to get your Social Security number
Right.
so that they can process
Yeah.
your win. And so anything that comes over the phone that either is designed to sounds alarming or is designed to entice you, just hang up the phone.
Yeah, just hang up the phone. So folks, watch out for those people. All right. Now we talked a little bit earlier about the generic drugs, but we also want to talk about, it says that Connecticut's taking part in a multi-state investigation on an opioid epidemic.
Yeah, we have a public health crisis in this country of opioid addiction. In my term in office, since 2012, my second year in office, we've gone from 357 opioid-related deaths to, we're on a track this year to hit 1,100. In contrast, we have about 100 homicides a year. We have around 300 deaths due to traffic accidents a year. So opioids are almost treble homicides and traffic accidents combined. And Connecticut has worked to create a multi-state investigation. We're one of the lead states in it. And we're investigating two things. One, did manufacturers really starting around 2005, start to market opioids, not simply for intense pain, like cancer or a bad accident, but for chronic pain, lower back pain, for example.
Sure.
And did they sell doctors that did they overstate the benefits and understate the risks?
I have heard that. Well, George, we have breezed through everything. Hopefully we have informed and educated our viewers, and I do appreciate your time. As always, you're very candid, and we very much appreciate that. So I'd like to remind our viewers that to watch all of our programs, and I would like to also give the website here if you'd like any information for the AG's office. The website is www.ct.gov/AG. And our website to see all of our programs is www.ctvalleyviews.com. This is Susan Regan. Thank you for joining me and bringing proof to the people.
The men who died, who gave that right to me, and I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today.